How do you spot a fake? Well, ladies and gents, the copycat killer has been caught, and the next few weeks will most definitely shed light on the answer to this question. But first, let me revel in the knowledge that he is caught, captured, incarcerated, and no longer menacing the streets in lackluster fashion. Oh yes, that feels good, doesn't it? Anyways, the suspect, although I think it's safe to say the culprit, trial pending of course, but I've seen a few slam dunk cases in my time, hell, more than a few, and this one is basically gift wrapped. So apart from Barteski and crew burning down their division and the night is still young, we will soon be seeing said deplorable bastard thrown in a tin can for the next 25 plus to life. So while the true IK is still out there and her victims are still yet to receive any true justice, friends and family of Sarah Tales and Danny Barr can maybe rest a little easier knowing that the copycat is behind bars. On that note, Furball, Danny's cat, is still expected to make a full recovery. He's resting up at the Humane Society as we speak, and there's already a list of people wanting to take him home. So Danny, rest easy, he's gonna be just fine. I'm Ben Robinson, and here's what we know. The copycat killer is at this point believed to be Ramon Ludo, aka Isaac Kurt. Yes, that's right, and I'm sure it's not coming as a surprise to many of you out there, but yes, the very same Isaac Kurt, or Ramon, as I should say, who's called into the show. He was arrested at his home because where else do you go if you're an idiot on the run from authorities than to the same address listed on your driver's license? Suffice it to say, the police put in their due diligence, and after having a few tips called in from anonymous sources, Mr. Ludo's apartment was located, the door kicked in, and there was Mr. Ludo, in the process of sealing the open cut in his leg with a hot glue gun. Wouldn't have been my first choice, but at least he had the common sense not to go to a hospital, and at the end of the day, I guess there's worse choices than a glue gun to put the gaping hole in your leg back together. Now, usually at this point, I'd be diving into a case file or report or one of the many other sources I managed to get my hands on, but this time it's not necessary. The police are flaunting every chunk of evidence they can get at the press. News bulletins, memos, the pure mountain of evidence against Mr. Ludo is going out broadband to the masses. Now, usually when taking down a suspect, cops rush in, bag him, and they're out of there quick as can be. But this morning when Ramon Ludo was frog-marched out of his home, it was into a sea of reporters and smartphones, almost as if someone had wanted the arrest televised. Now, I'm not pointing fingers, but there's only one guess as to who would benefit the most from such a massive media orgy, and Barteski, I'm looking at you. From this point on, it's the usual rat race. He was arrested and is currently being held pending trial at Division 51. Good job, boys. Took you long enough, but a win's a win. So now that this manic, art-loving, tenor-range douchebag is off the streets, and I'm glad about that, don't get me wrong, we have another problem. And what problem is that? Well, there is definitely something amiss about how the cops are handling Ramon's arrest. You see, my only problem with how the police have handled their investigation so far, well, there's several problems actually, but the most recent is that they're walking around heads held high announcing to the world that IK, the image killer, has been apprehended. Well, you should not be counting your dismembered corpses before they're buried, Barteski, because while you did take a killer off the streets, you did not take the killer off the streets. And Barteski, if you're listening, this isn't me trying to rake in those last few likes and views before I either close down the channel or move on to the next tragedy. You have not caught the image killer. And I would like to think that out of everyone down there at Division 51, my voice isn't just rolling eyeballs, and at least one or two of you can see Ramon for what he is, and more importantly, what he is not. So by all means, nail him to the wall for Sarah Tales and add some screws in for Danny, but don't think for a minute that you've got the image killer. Before any amount of legal justice can be handed down, the prosecutors and police now face the daunting, nigh impossible task of finding an impartial jury, especially if they're looking to try and prosecute him for the rest of IK's murders. An interesting problem from a legal standpoint, considering in this day and age, what with email, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Reddit, and of course YouTube, who hasn't heard of the image killer? So how do you find someone who's so far removed from it all that they don't have an opinion or bias on this topic? Because remember, it isn't just a bias towards IK, it's towards any of the victims as well. You can't have a jury filled with fans of the recently deceased, and while that's normally not much of a problem, you have the combined fan base of nearly a dozen very prominent online stars. Danny Barr alone, may he rest in peace, Danny Barr subscribers alone account for 1 million people, and at least 50% of that is domestic. Throw in the other victims and their followers and you have a problem. And hell, that doesn't even include the IK supporters, a demographic which has skyrocketed since the copycat got started, calling for IK to return to the good old justice she was doling out before. Some people have even started providing potential victims for her, as we saw a few weeks ago with Jet Patel offering himself up to be picked off. So how do you weed them out? Regardless, I will be watching the coming trial with great interest. But to all my fellow cynics and subscribers alike, keep in mind that the image killer is still quite at large, and with this scene-stealing hack out of the way, I don't think it'll be very long before we see her make a very loud and very public return. Till then, the circus continues, and that's all I've got for you guys. Good night!